Finance Minister out on Budget 2017, 3 months after demonetization, and the expectations were very, very high. What was left on the table for you? Like the Finance Minister promised, is there actually money left in your pocket? Can you use that money to spend, to save, to invest? Can you buy your house? That's the question we're asking tonight, live across the Times network on Times Now, ET Now, and Magic Bricks Now, as we focus on you and your money right here on the network. Now, we have audience joining us in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Calcutta, in Chennai, and in Bangalore today with questions about how these announcements that we heard in the budget today, how do they affect my money? What happens to me at the end of the day? A lot of questions, especially from the salaried middle class, who are going to want to know what this means for them. In the studio with me, helping me answer those questions, are my experts. Virendra Kumar joins me from Delhi. He's my investment expert. Shailesh Haribhakti is our tax expert. Anuj Puri of JLL is our real estate expert. And Pankaj Razdan, our life insurance and investment expert. I want to welcome all four guests to this wonderful panel. But first, before we go any further, here's a very quick wrap of everything that was said today that will actually affect your money. Take a look.
Affordable housing will now be given infrastructure status, which enables those projects to avail the associated benefits. I therefore propose to reduce the existing rate of taxation for individual assessees between the income 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakhs to 5% instead of the present rate of 10%.
The big announcements from the budget that impact your money. If you earn less than 3 lakh rupees a year, you will not have to pay any tax. The tax slab for those who earn between 3 and 5 lakh has been cut to 5%. That is a total saving of 15,000 a year for all taxpayers. But for those who make more than 50 lakh a year, will have to pay a 10% surcharge on their income tax. Filing taxes have also become simpler, with tax return form reduced to just 1 page. The other big advantage for property: if you want to sell property after 2 years, you will pay lower tax on the profit because of a change in capital gains rules. Affordable housing has been given a push, but the Rajiv Gandhi Equity Savings Scheme to encourage new investors has been removed.
All right, to go straight then to our tax slab change that the Finance Minister gave us, where 10% has become 5%, it literally translates to a 12,500 rupee saving for all taxpayers. That's, if you calculate it, 1,041 rupees saved every month. That's the total saving you really have at the end of the day. Shailesh Haribhakti, very quick question. Has this budget really been fair to the middle class salaried taxpayer? Is it still the case that 1% of this country is supporting the rest of it?
Well, I think it's a great balancing act that the Finance Minister has attempted and somewhat succeeded. So if you look at the salaried employee stack, people with the 5 lakh level of salary constitute a very large percentage of the salary earners.
Okay.
And to give them relief is focusing the relief on people who perhaps most need it.
But to be fair, he also talked about bringing more people into the income tax basket, which he did not do.
Exactly what he meant was that we will bring people into the net. They will file a very simple 1-page return, and for 1 year, there will be no scrutiny. Now, the message, the big message that he is giving out, and this was spread all over his speech, was that we now can track everything you're doing. So data analytics, digitization, all of that is giving us access to what is happening. We already have the tax information network, so your expense is my income. Now he's saying that we now know how to run this and make sure that this will come into the formal system. That is why the advanced tax receipts have gone up by a historic 34%, never before achieved in history.
I mean, there are two things here. One is, of course, bringing in those people who haven't paid tax up till now. And the other is the fact that the tax system for a lot of the self-employed doesn't require them to pay any tax because they can deduct so much out of the tax, out of the income that they're making. I want to take in as many questions as we can, and we have people in Delhi right now. I understand you have questions. There's a gentleman in the suit in the first row. Go ahead. What is your question?
So yes, 2017 budget is here, and we have Mr. Rajesh Sahai, the chairman of an high-rank institute. He has a very interesting question, so just let's begin with him. Sir.
Since I am attached to the education sector, the interest rate on education loan is still very high. I have a request to my finance minister that it should be reduced so that the quality education, students should go for quality education and paying less interest on their loan, education loan. Because we are talking about digital economy, knowledge economy, and then when we are talking about digital generation. So we should give them this kind of relief. Now the interest rate on education loan is something around varying from 10% to 12%. So
I want to bring in Dhirendra Kumar here. Dhirendra, obviously interest rates have been coming down, but the bigger thing that could have been done for education loans, given that, and we've talked about this, education loans is when someone is investing in themselves, and that is really the strongest investment that our country can make at this point. Why aren't education loans completely tax deductible? Why isn't the principal repayment also tax deductible? Right now, only the interest portion is deductible, and the interest is very, very high. Should the finance minister have paid closer attention to education loans? Dhirendra?
Ideally it should be, and I think that is one investment which generally almost always pays. But I think it's a policy thing. One thing one should not miss out, that there is a 80C benefit available for the tuition fee being paid for the child.
All right, there is an 80C benefit for tuition fees paid for the children. Shailesh Bhakti, should there be a bump up there in what's available on student loans?
I'm not very much in favor of very specific exemptions like that. Because once you do that, you will have every constituency which feels that what they need is very, very important coming in and asking for it. I like the idea of making the environment such that the interest rates will drop without affecting the saver so much that the whole balance of interest shifts.
Anuj, let's talk about housing. And one of the things that we know every Indian wants is to be able to afford a home, able to buy a home. And the audience that we have joining us today, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Kolkata, all of these cities, people want to be able to buy homes. All of the announcements that came in through the budget today, will that allow the people who are watching right now to buy their homes? Will it make it more affordable?
So
is that affordable housing?
What is a very clear message that the finance minister has sent out to the developers is forget about luxury, forget about premium. This is the sector that I'm going to concentrate. This is what I have done over the last 3 budgets, and this is what my focus is going to be. Now, clearly, it is a message to the developers, get the innovation going, how Singapore is doing smaller houses, how Hong Kong is doing smaller houses.
Explain to us the smaller houses. 30 square meters inside of our cities. What does 30 square meters look like? Or in square feet, what does that mean?
So it's 340 square feet.
Right.
And if you do that as a built-up, then it's nearly about 470 square feet. Yeah. So in 470 square
340
feet...
carpet is what we're...
That's right.
Yes.
That's carpet,
which is the absolute basic, according to the UN, that you should provide to a family.
Yeah, it is. And, he could have stretched that definition to say the ask of the industry was that 30 square meters should be 60 square meters and 60 should have been ideally 90. But he has still stretched it to say is that he's defined 30 square meters as carpet and said his built up is 30% more than the carpet. So clearly, that message came in 2014, 2015, but I think the developer community did not really recognize, and they kept on saying that there's going to be something that will be done.
Here's the question then. For all of us who are focused on the fact that this government promised housing for all. Now, by all, I mean all, not just the 300 square feet. Do you think that's actually going to be possible now? Are we any closer to making that possible?
So it is going to be very difficult to say housing for all by 2022. But I think the initiatives that are being taken are in the right direction. And Faith, that is where the largest demand is. So I agree that a lot of people sitting in the studio would say, look, 450 square feet does not suit me. But if you look at the bottom of that pyramid, that's where the majority of the demand is, and that's what the finance minister, I think, over the last 3 years has addressed. And this one, I thought, was very critical for him to declare affordable housing as an infrastructure sector, because there are several benefits. And as we go through the show, perhaps we can have a look at those benefits.
So basically what we learn is that the finance minister has decided that 300 or so carpet square feet is the focus area for him. And that is what he's going to focus on. And the rest of it, fundamentally, going to have to fend for themselves. So let me go over to Kolkata. Tamal is standing by in Kolkata with an audience who has questions for us. Tamal, is there an audience member there who has a question?
Well, that's right. Even though the budget has focused a lot on rural development, rural economy and urban development, infrastructure development, but then and also focused on youth and the development of holistically of youth, still there are qualms. Some qualms are born out of politics, some qualms are generally born out of confusion. I have a certain set of people on my right are students who are passing out from college, about to pass out from college this year. On my left are people who are from the world of finance. They belong to the Financial Literacy Forum. I would first quickly go to you, sir. Do you have a question? This year's budget had been promising on several quarters, but do you have a question? Do you have still doubts?
My question is regarding GDP number. Although Finance Minister in his budget speech mentioned that next year GDP number will become normal, but he did not say how and why. So this is my question.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Yes. The exercise of demonetization was historic, and what was most historic was the people following it quietly. I was expecting some kind of a statement, a one-liner, as a closure to this entire activity, as to, what has happened, how much has been collected. And I know it's RBI's job, but we could have had a one-liner. I mean, it would have been really good if we had.
Okay, so these are the first two questions you're posing. There are other people too who have their own set of questions. We will be asking those questions in the due course of time, but these are the first two questions they have in their mind to begin with.
Those are excellent questions, and I'm going to take this to our panelists, because a lot of people were expecting some sort of, like the lady quietly pointed out, closure on demonetization. How much money has come in? How much black money are we talking about? We haven't received any of that, Pankaj. And to say that, okay, GDP is going to be normal next year, not telling us how. Do you want to answer that question?
So actually, if you do a math, if you look at the total expenditure and you remove the actual revenue expenditure, if you remove the normally in terms of salaries and other expenses, he's given roughly about 8.5-9 lakh crores of revenue expenditure and 2,75,000 crores of capital expenditure. It's almost 25% up than over last year. And it's been very well organized and balanced, which could actually trigger a growth in economy. Economy would have gone only on three things. Either private sector come back and invest, which doesn't seem like in the current scenario, and it doesn't look like that it will come in a hurry. Second, you do something which will actually increase consumption. And third, otherwise the public sector expenditure has to be such which would increase your economy. If you look at particularly housing, just to give you some sense on a housing, a simple 30 square meter house, 350, 400 square feet house generates 3,000 man-hours of employment. So I think when he was talking about generating affordable housing, it's one of the best involvement to go and create humongous amount of job creation. Look at the second job creation which happened in this country is MSME. They're suffering after demonetization. They had an issue around in terms of doing their business. I think a lot of perks have been given on MSME. Look at in terms of the money which has been spent on the transport system. You have about 1,31,000 crores going to railways, about 30-40,000 crores more than what they have done it. And they have humongous amount of money which is going into roads. You're talking about 133 kilometers a day, which was about 70 kilometers a day. So if you look at the triggers are there, and triggers have two things. One, to revive the economy. Second, to build consumption. Third, to create employment. So wherever the employment creations are there, he has actually nudged those people on the. So otherwise, to really shift a 1% GDP through either a pure services or purely only through agriculture, you don't create that kind of a job. Though he has done a lot, even on agriculture. I mean, spending 10 lakh crores on agriculture is not a small thing. He has a drip irrigation for a particular fund. Har boond ki jo usne kaha, I forgot exactly what was there, but it's there. He's got another fund to go and develop your agricultural system. So I think overall, I look like GDP. It looks like 7.2. If you really do the math, it comes to 7.25. If you remove expenditure and everything, 3.2 a fiscal deficit. It looks like to me that it's quite doable.
Okay.
I think in terms of monetization, demonetization, he made a very clear statement in that. I think it was a one-line statement. He talked about that, so many accounts, have come so many lakhs and so many crores,
The
80
money that
lakhs
has
and
come into
money that
various
has come in.
accounts. Yes, yes.
And he actually linked it very well with the number of people who are paying a tax. I think that was enough to go and bridge the two things and said that yes, if the closure is there, and we'll go back to this set of accounts and collect a tax.
All right. Let me bring in Dhirendra Kumar. Dhirendra, are you happy with whatever we heard on demonetization and remonetization? Do you believe it was enough closure?
I think, it was not as much about demonetization, but it was all about, government seems very convinced, or the minister was very clear that digitization is the only way to build in accountability. One thing which actually I've left, which I kept expecting, and, I find it amiss, that when he referred to a non-compliant society, he never referred to, his own department, what it has been doing all these years, how it all has happened to this extent. That when he was quoting, he has referred to a lot of numbers, that how many people pay how much and, how little it is. I think, the starting point, after demonetization, somewhere we need to find a mention that what has been from their side.
That's a fair point. In fact, let me just go across to Chennai. Shabir is standing by with people from Chennai who have questions on how the budget impacts them. Shabir, anyone there with questions for us?
Well, definitely there has been a mixed response for this budget, but there have been questions too. In fact, I have people from different backgrounds. I have people from the corporate world, from activists, and also from the IT background. Joining me is Mr. Ganapathy. Sir, you were talking about FDI, so you had a valid point there. So what is your question with regard to FDI?
See, let me begin by saying that it's a pretty decent budget, not a game changer, but no negatives. I think one of the big bangs that has not got the real focus, I think, is the abolition of the FIPB, and I think that's very positive. But having said that, I was just wondering if abolishing FIPB also ensures that FDI in retail, which is so essential to control your supply side inflation and reduce the farm to fork ratio, would now come on the automatic route and ensure that many of the issues concerned with supply side inflation, like your cold storages, warehousing, logistics, management, etc., would be addressed. I think that is something that we would need clarity going forward.
And Jairam, who is also an activist, who has been fighting against political parties and questioning their political funding. So you had a question. What is your doubt with regard to this entire announcement? Because there seems to be, an acceptance overall with regard to this kind of, announcement that has been made by the finance minister. But why do you have doubts in that?
See, I have two doubts. One is with respect to this, cash ceiling of 2,000. Definitely it creates more hassles for the political party. But the question is, today 83% of the funding of the political parties, the major parties, is unaccounted, which means they receive in cash less than 20,000. Now they probably will do the same thing for less than 2,000, because for less than 2,000 they probably don't need to reveal the donor. So it only creates more hassles, but how will it significantly reduce the percentage is something that's a big question. The second thing is with respect to the electoral bonds. See, if you look at the electoral bonds, they say that now the corporates can actually buy these bonds, and that would be then given to the political parties. Now the question is, doesn't this decrease transparency actually, because now from now on the public won't get to know which corporate donated how much money to the political parties. So these are the two questions primarily that we have.
Right, these are the questions that are coming in from Chennai. These are initial questions. We also have people from different backgrounds here. So we will put these questions to our experts who are there in Delhi and Mumbai.
All right, I'll take that question. Shailesh Haribhakti, if you want to take the question about electoral reform on taxation. It was very interestingly brought in as part of personal taxation that political parties are now going to have to file their taxes, and that limit of anonymous donors can only give them 2,000 rupees per head. Does that change anything really?
Tremendously. I think we need to now start becoming less cynical and less skeptical, and actually embrace this. Because what is being said is that you can now contribute to political parties, you can make these donations, the political parties will also have to file their returns, they will be accountable. It was both. You know, we always look at it in isolation. The entire way this electoral bond scheme, the redemption into the political party, the conditionalities of audit, of filing returns and all of that, I think it's cleaning up the atmosphere. For the first time in a budget speech, this kind of announcement being made should be applauded very, very loudly.
All right. You have a question here in Mumbai. Go ahead.
Well, as a senior citizen, I find the budget hasn't done enough for the seniors. They did announce a policy linked to LIC where we can invest and get a fixed interest of 8% for 10 years, which is not bad. But they could have done something more. For example, Mediclaim policies run by the government companies. They just give you hospitalization. There's no other cost repaid by these policies unless you're in hospital even for a day. And, they could have, government could have given funds to these companies so they accept maybe bills from the policyholders for small illnesses or small expenses over health, which are fairly regular. Nobody goes to hospital every day, luckily. So, I mean, and another thing is, till now, the policies are not open to people over a certain age, 70 or 80, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there are old people who never had these policies in their lifetime. It didn't exist, and who are still without any medical cover. So the government could have thought of that.
Let me take this question to Pankaj, because Pankaj runs a life insurance company, but an insurance company nevertheless. Pankaj, there is an entire group of people, the senior citizens, who need to be covered. And because health costs are what they are in India, and they're ridiculously expensive if you want to go to a good hospital, there needs to be a push, maybe from the government, to encourage senior health insurance.
So I think couple of questions I'll break in couple of parts. Part number one, I think the product announced for 8% also has to be looked in relation to what the interest rate would be. Today, your 10-year government security is 6.39 or 6.4. Potentially, it could become a 6%. The 6% versus 8% is almost like a 35-40% more than what you get it. So unfortunately, we still live in an era when you used to get 10-12%. So I think it's a brilliant thing when government announced. I absolutely agree with you, because beyond a certain age right now, we are not mature enough industry. We don't have enough data in this country. The data between a person who falls sick versus a doctor versus a chemist is not available. So there are humongous amount of leakages and fraud possible in health and life insurance. I think government has to really work around this soft infrastructure so that they can have enough data to go and start issuing policies for people who are even older age. I think it's a genuine concern, because people are not aware till 5-10 years back. So people who have retired, who are old, they don't have anything. We don't have enough social security system. So I think that problem remains, and I think that problem can only be sorted out by two ways. One, as we go along, we'll get to see much more government keep doing it, and at least the new generation which is coming remains cognizant of this fact and start investing right on their behalf. And third, there are enough government schemes which are available right now for the health, which I think the old scheme, I don't remember the sections and all, but there are enough schemes which policies are still there. And which, my sense, if you're not going, hospitalization is the one key in that. But all your major illnesses are covered, all your major hospitalization are covered. Day to day, that one has to live with.
All right, so just for our senior citizens, you must remember that we're in a lowering interest rate regime. So over the next 10 years, our interest rate, which you're comfortable at 8%, might go down to 6%. Maybe even to 5%. So what you're getting here is a guaranteed 8% for the next 10 years, while the interest rates on rest of the products might come
sorry,
down.
I lied in it, because this 8% also has to be looked at lower interest and also with inflation. So you're not living in an inflation era of 10 and 11%. You're talking inflation at 5 and 6%. So if you're looking at an inflation era of 5 and 6%, it's a very positive return of 3%.
Yes.
And earlier when we got 10%, we were actually having 11% inflation. We're actually having a negative return on most of our returns.
And so also, the other thing we should remember, for all the young people who are watching, you are allowed a tax deduction on a health insurance policy that you might buy for your parents. You should do that as soon as possible.
That's
and the faster you buy that policy for your parents, the better it will be. We have Pooja Prasanna, who's standing by in Bangalore with questions for us. Pooja, anyone there with a question?
Faye, plenty of questions here from the IT and the startup capital of the country. Of course, this budget was seen as a clean-up budget with a little bit of something for everyone, while at one hand we saw more emphasis on job creation and also affordable housing. We also saw certain SOPs for minorities, especially SC/STs. But let me just quickly go across to some people here. What is it that you wanted to see from this budget, and what is it that you saw that you were happy with?
Pooja, thanks for asking. So, a couple of things here. Job creation emphasis means that women should also be able to predictably go to jobs. If you look at, about 50% of the women that live lower middle class, for them to go to work, they need Anganwadi centers. Anganwadi allocation has actually been halved when the BJP first took over the government. After that, they've barely brought it back to the original levels. It is still a good, 20% below the original levels. Also, although the claim is that they've increased it by 25%, it is below what it was 4 years ago. Which means as a woman, right, as a lower middle class woman, how do you predictably even commit yourself to a job if you don't know for sure if the next year is going to swing widely and you don't have the Anganwadi benefits? Absolutely. That's one question. The other thing is, budget is supposed to be both income and expenditure statement. Right. Can we get information on what was the government advertisement spend, and what is their projection for the coming year? How much have they allocated to themselves for advertisements? All companies reveal their overheads. Right. What is the overhead of the government?
Very specific questions. One, something that affects everybody in general, but more importantly relating to BJP, because let's remember, they have been very, very big when it comes to advertising their schemes. So 2 questions coming in from Tara, if you could just put that across.
I don't know which of our panelists want to do this. Mr. Haribakti, it's fair. Yeah. We should know how much money is being spent on advertising from every one of those heads, because from Swachh Bharat downwards to the Anganwadi program, they all have communication budgets, but we don't know how much that budget is.
I'm sure that those numbers are available in the budget papers. I don't know them ready at hand, but it's a small percentage of the spend. And I think communication is very important to encourage the continuity of the program. But I truly like the Anganwadi allocation idea. And I think if it is pointed out, and we should all give our support to that idea and make sure that the allocation for Anganwadis go up. The person made a fantastic point. Yes. That deserves higher allocation.
Yes, and also, I mean, to point out, while we're talking about women, the Nirbhaya Fund this year received no allocation at all from the budget, and it normally gets 1,000 crore rupees per year to work on safety for women, but there was no allocation in this budget on the Nirbhaya Fund at all. Let's also go back then to Calcutta. Do we have a question in Calcutta from some of the young people who are there?
Well, yes, Shri, there are questions. As I said, to begin with, I have 2 sets of people. On my left are people who actually come from the financial, consultancy and the forum they belong to. They're extremely sound with economics. But on my right are these students who are extremely optimistic about staying back in India and do something here in the country, for the country. And they're here not for any politics, but to get the question answered. What's your question? So you are concerned about the future, and you were also concerned about the defense expenditure we're talking about.
That is something that I would like to mention that our finance minister has not talked enough about in the last 2 budgets, including this one. Our defense expenditure is somewhere around 2.78 lakh, which is around 2.26% of the GDP, whereas the parliamentary committee benchmarks a 3% minimum per GDP expenditure for the defense. And we are seeing viral videos where soldiers do not receive the proper rations that they require, and yet we are not seeing enough of the GDP being allocated to the defense.
You want the government to ensure there is enough care being promised and done for those who are fighting for us, fighting for the country. Any other question you have? Are you concerned about your future? Do you think the promises being made for the youth, or the special mention of youth and youth development, do you find them promising and assuring?
One dimension I'd like to add to this, if I may, I'd like to ask what exactly the budget has in store for creative groups in separate cities specifically. Like, supposing I come from a theatre group, is the government doing anything specific to sort of push or bolster their attempts at showcasing something to an audience and maybe propagating ideas here and there? So that's what I would like to ask.
Okay, Shri, one last question. I know we are running out of time. One last question I would like to take from the audience out here. What's your question, ma'am?
My question is on where are the incentives to boost the digital economy. A few concessions have been given to manufacturers of parts which are used in digital payment machines. But where are the big time incentives? Because we have to keep in mind that we are breaking a 70-year-old tradition, moving from a cash economy to a digital economy. There is a tipping point after which it's going to become a habit. So I want to know, where are the aggressively put big time incentives?
So do you think government, the finance minister lacked on touching upon those issues?
Yes, very much, because we were expecting big incentives to boost the digital economy, incentivizing digital payment, penalizing cash payments. So I was really looking forward to that.
But even though the government is talking much about the accountability factor, but then these are the questions. One, the question which is extremely important as while you're actually embarking on a cashless digital economy, what would be the road like? How do you think the entire rural and the urban setup would be adapting to that massive change? On the other hand, of this young gentleman asking, what about the defense expenditure? Is the defense expenditure enough to ensure that our soldiers are happy, they are safe, and they have enough to be content while they are fighting on the border? And at the same time, they're young people who are wondering whether the government is pushing for the future of the young people to be settling here in the country. Back to you.
I want to take this question to Dhirendra Kumar. Dhirendra, we talked a lot about demonetization and remonetization. We now know from today's budget at least that cash transactions above 3 lakh rupees are banned. Effectively, they can no longer be possible. Also, there was talk about massive highways of broadband and hotspotting various villages in our in our country to allow internet access. But there are bigger problems still. Unbanked Indians, villages without electricity, villages without mobile connectivity. And there's a possibility and a risk here that we might just go back to using cash because the cash is now available in the market. So was there enough done, do you believe, to answer that question, to sort of make sure that all of the efforts put in by every single Indian during that process has not gone to waste?
Yeah, I don't think it has gone waste. I think this budget only furthers that objective. If you look at, this is a very big thing that 3 lakh rupees, more than 3 lakh rupees spent will not be allowed. So businesses will be forced to, account for and digitize their payments. And that I don't think is a very small thing. From tomorrow onward, a lot of businesses have to reconfigure their spending pattern or the way they spend. Not only that, if you look at a series of small things, starting from, the abolition of the service charge on, IRCTC, besides, incentivizing or, creating awareness about BHIM app, and making it, the default thing. I think that these are big moves. Of course, it is unlikely to be. There is unlikely to be a situation that cash can be completely, eliminated from the system, and all our payment mechanism will be, completely digital. But I think these are big moves, and I think development of the ecosystem for making these mechanism. Look at the Aadhaar-based payment, and that will become, if it has the potential to become mainstream, and the way it has been emphasized and resources allocated for this and a time frame, I think what we have seen post demonetization and all the mention in this budget, I think it is development of a wonderful ecosystem, and I don't think this is, once again, we should not be cynical about.
All right, don't be cynical at this point. That's the larger message coming out of this panel, at least. I have a viewer with me who has a question about real estate. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, affordable housing seems to be a very important focus because it also can give a lot of spending. There can be a lot of employment related to that. But if FM is at it for 3 years, and we see that even likes of Tata Housing, having started with nano homes, now are building like very expensive homes. For whatever reason, the margins are probably low in these. So there are hardly any developers who are building anything around, say, 30 square meter space. What more can government do? I mean, it looks like
it's a very good question. So what has happened is that the government from day one has been very clear that we are going to focus on affordable housing. It's the developers who haven't understood that message until this afternoon. That it has become very clear to them is that this government is only going to focus on affordable housing. They're not going to focus on middle class. They're not going to focus on luxury, premium. So for a long time, the developer community led by CREDAI has been arguing with the government that give us SOPs for those. And they've now seen consistently for 3 years that the benefit will only come to affordable housing. Today, you were to speak with the developers. They will say, we're now going to start looking at this a lot more seriously because we now know this is where the government's focus is. This is where we have to help.
To be fair, a lot of developers also turn around and say, unless land is more easier to access, we cannot build. But that is not changed.
And he's done it. Because, very small point, and it looks like it's just gone through, is the way that he has articulated the JVs and JDs. And, first time I understood it, I said, wow, what a finance minister. It appeared he was like a real estate guy. Because JV, JD, not many people know it's joint venture and joint development. And they've said is until the completion of the project, there is no taxation. That means that you'll be now able to provide your land as a landowner to the developer to do affordable housing and pay the taxes only upon the completion of the project. The trouble was otherwise that it had to be paid upfront. And there weren't many landowners who were wanting to do JV, JD because there was an incidence of tax. Now having pushed it to the end.
There was one more change, and I want to quickly bring this up before we bring in any more questions. Mr. Haribhakti, I'll come to you with this. Long-term capital gains tax on real estate. So as an average homeowner, if I wanted to sell a home and buy another home, I would have to wait at least 3 years. Otherwise, I'd have to pay very hefty short-term capital gains tax. That 3-year limit has now been brought down to 2 years. So I can sell a home and buy another one after just 2 years.
And the indexation.
Has also been moved. So effectively, while it's a complicated thing to explain to you on TV, effectively, the taxation has come down drastically if I'm selling a home to buy another home, or if I'm just selling a home at all. What does that mean then for the market and
it's
for
a huge boost to making real estate seem more liquid. But let me address the earlier question. What can the government do? I think in addition to it being a labor deployment activity, 3D printed homes are now available in China at $5,000 and it takes 60 days to complete a home. So this whole idea about long-termism in terms of building homes is over. Now we need to build to scale very rapidly, absolutely what is required by our people. If we need to house the whole country, you need to deploy technology in addition to deploying labor, and you need to have a supportive financing infrastructure, which is already there. The largest growing segment in finance today is the micro loans that are being given to people who want to have affordable homes. Right. That is on a hockey stick growth.
I just want to go back to Delhi. I'll get you a mic in a second. I just want to go back to Delhi and take another question from Delhi before we take more questions from Mumbai. Delhi, do you have a question for us?
And yes, we have a set of gentlemen here who are doing their PhD in social work, and they have very interesting questions to ask. So you, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions regarding that women and child welfare related, what that budget has allotted. 1,84,00,000 crores is not enough because it is a kind of broad umbrella, because ICDS, Integrated Child Development and Integrated Child Protection Scheme, it is a broad way. So we need to strengthen the children's as well as women's related welfare scheme is not enough this much budget. And second question is that by 2018, to providing throughout the India, all the villages providing power supply, it is not possible because it is not practically, it is not possible. It is a kind of gimmick, we can say, because we need to practically, we are expected more rural people, rural India people, they are expecting practical about this particular budget, but it is, we cannot expecting that much, but it is impossible to provide in by 2018 throughout the whole India village to power supply.
All right, I'm going to take another question. You have a question? Go ahead.
I've got some other question.
Okay, go ahead.
So ATC has not been changed. So actually, they are not encouraging for the saving. What is your opinion, sir, about ATC? They are not reduced the. They are not increased from 2 lakh to more than that.
Yeah, ATC is currently at 1.5 lakh rupees, which is a really
this
low amount.
Long-term capital gain for housing, they have made. According to my point, from 3 years to 2 years, it is very good for investors.
All right. Let me first take the first question, which is a good point. And I think what we're picking up from here is the cynicism that both you and Dhirendra said that we should possibly give up at this point. But there is a certain amount of cynicism that the targets that are announced by the government tend to be a little unbelievable, even if we take housing for all at this point. Are they just ambitious targets that are being put out, Mr. Haribhakti?
Today, technology exists to fulfill them. So I don't accept that these are completely crazy targets. On ATC, I have great sympathy for expanding the omnibus savings-related exemption for tax. But we need to understand that we have to balance inflation, we have to balance fiscal discipline, international credit rating, the way the country is viewed.
But I mean, to take your own argument, if everybody here were to invest their money long-term, that money would be used to build a country, using the technology, using all of the, all of the know-how and all of that.
So,
but
as I said, I have great sympathy for expanding ATC, but I think we need to also contextualize that in terms of what room the finance minister has.
Pankaj, too many things jostling for space in that 1.5 lakh rupees. If you have a home loan and a salary, you're done. There's no room then for life insurance. There's no room for anything else.
No, absolutely right. I think that you can't have any argument. The higher, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think he's aptly talked about it. But you have to balance somewhere. In fact, as much as what ATC is required for everybody sitting in this room, you also look at the social divide between absolutely lower end of the society, whether it's in agriculture, absolutely low end of the income, was growing too big. You cannot run a country, a social country, with social fabric where the divide could be such humongous divide. So I think if you look at this budget has tried to address some of those issues, whether it's agriculture, absolutely low end of income. So this is important. Somehow we have to sacrifice. We sacrifice, you sacrifice. All of us to do it in the best interest of the country. And I think if you look at holistically, if you're building a social fabric which is more stronger than ever before, I think some of these issues can be resolved over a period of time. You and me can live without ATC.
Let me just also bring in Dhirendra Kumar. Dhirendra, do you agree that it's time for the middle class to sacrifice at this point, pay those extra taxes, put up with the fact that the ATC benefit still is only at 1.5 lakh rupees?
Yeah, ideally I would say that, ATC benefit should be indexed and it should automatically increase and it should not be at the mercy of the finance minister announcing it every year. Likewise for our tax slabs, it should be at least inflation adjusted. But at the same time, I would say that, it should become a little more stringent because retirement savings should be segregated from all the other expenses that we incur, which is part of the ATC. I think if it becomes substantially investment oriented and long-term savings oriented, and there are constraints or there are penalization built into the whole provision that if you pull it out way before that, because most people, I don't think by any yardstick 3-year lock-in period on a tax saving fund can be defined as long-term. What it is supposed to be. I think looking at this as some kind of long-term savings incentivization and providing some degree of portability, or within that, I think that could be a great start for a retirement account for most people, which can be mounted on ATC.
Agree.
All right, that's a great suggestion. Let me just go back to Chennai. I understand Chennai has a question for us. Shabir is standing by in Chennai. Shabir, go ahead.
Well, post demonetization, this budget has generated a lot of interest, and your question.
See, I think the 5% reduction of tax for companies, the MSME companies, is a brilliant thing. Companies will get a lot of spare cash to put back into their business and grow further. But having said that, for income tax for individuals, there are a couple of points that I'd like to make. One is it would have been nice if this 2.5 to 5 lakh bracket would have been extended to 10 lakhs, because that is predominantly the bracket where people start investing in, say, a house or a much bigger investment. Now that spare cash would be very useful. Point number one. Point number two, I think it's time that everyone starts paying tax.
So that was one expectation, and you were talking about women's safety, because that is something which you feel has been ignored in this budget.
Yeah, I think another panelist mentioned that there's been no additional top-up on the Nirbhaya Fund. We also expected some announcements about what large cities are expected to do, or even rural areas are expected to do in terms of women's safety. I think there was a couple of topics completely missing from this budget. Women's safety is one, environment and climate change is the other, and healthcare has been widely ignored. So these are topics that we expect. One last point, I'm all for transparency. I think individuals are expected to be transparent, companies are expected to be transparent, political parties are expected to be transparent. Where is the transparency on outcome measures of the government? Budget after budget, we hear lakhs of crores allocated to schemes. We don't see tangible improvements in the quality of education, of healthcare, or of the rural poor. So I think it's time the budget also addressed outcome measures for each sector.
And one question from Vivek. Vivek, you have been wanting to ask a question.
No, first of all, I think it is more of India-focused budget and not politically focused. Anyway, I had 4 questions. You said one, so I'll ask 2. Now, as an investment advisor, say it could be from point of view of retail investors, there's this new provision which has come which says STT will not be applicable on stocks or IPOs, or the tax benefit would not be available after 1st October 2004. Now, if government is going to come with a lot of IPOs and if there is no STT on that, how can it be tax-free? Now, secondly, there's also one confusion that the people staying on rented house, if they're paying more than 50,000 as rent, TDS got to be deducted. Now, it is going to be a big mess because TDS, will they have to register for TAN for cutting this TDS? So TDS could be a big mess. I don't know what is going to happen. So.
And one last question from this gentleman.
Yes. Yeah. So the gentleman was saying about the budget being mixed for everybody. So that's true. But then my question was in India we allocate very little portion for research, and considering we are going digital in every possible field, I didn't see much of investments coming into the research where cyber is involved, right? The IT technology is involved. Though there have been allocation for opening up new AIIMS Institute in a couple of states, but I think from the research into information technology, which is going to be pretty dangerous if we don't lay the foundation well when we are starting up. So what are the measures around that was a question from my end.
Well, a lot of interesting questions from Chennai to our panelists there in Mumbai and Delhi.
Well, our attempt is, of course, to answer as many questions as we can in the 1 hour allotted on what this budget means to you. And we've had some brilliant questions. Mr. Haribhakti, you were answering that question about why aren't more people paying tax? And the finance minister announced it. He announced the number of people who are actually declaring tax. And it was a laughable amount. We heard people inside Parliament laughing at that amount. This should be something done to bring more people into the tax net.
Absolutely. And the only way that you'll bring more people in is make them feel safe to be a taxpayer. I think the first time I heard that there will be accountability for the tax gatherer, he mentioned it specifically in his budget speech, and I hope that is followed up by administrative action. He says that people who come into the net and who pay their taxes fairly and completely will be dealt with respect and trust. And I think this is a good conversation that has begun. The thing about digitization and making sure that data analytics happens is that it makes accountability visit even the tax gatherer. And this is the first time that we now have everything transparent.
But do you believe also, I'm not talking about the people who are dodging the tax, but the ones who are legally out of the net at this point? Like I said, self-employed people have a lot of options for deductions out of their income. The agricultural sector completely doesn't pay tax at all. Should there be a relook at all of those things?
So, demonetization, GST, RERA, Benami Act, the Bankruptcy Code, when all of these become forces that work together, you will find no opportunity for even the self-employed to be any different from the salaried. That is the point that we need to take away.
I mean, deduction was only one part of it. I think the big problem of non-paying taxes, people used to take out the cash. I think with this whole cash coming into a formal economy, how much expensive will you show? What will you show? You can't keep showing that I'm drinking If 5 people in office have 50,000 cups of tea, you can't show that. You can't show that. So there's a limit to what you do. The moment it becomes formal, it's very easy to track, and digitization is going to help that. And I think the intent of this government is that increase the tax net. When that's increased, I think automatically the tax will come down.
All right, very quickly, what's your question?
Very quickly. We all said and done. Up till now, what government has done is to create 10 people in India who holds 50% or more of wealth of India. So naturally, all your policies are only favoring the rich, and the poor people are not benefiting by any of your policy.
All right, so you're saying the policy has actually led to an uneven concentration of wealth among the top percentage of this country. Dhirendra, I'll take that question to you. The top of the pyramid in unevenly benefiting in our economy, should that be evened out? Can that be evened out in any way?
Undoubtedly, the world is like that only. But looking at this budget, in fact, it has done the reverse. If you look at the smallest guy, he is going to go pay less tax. If you look at the smallest company, they are going to pay less tax, and by quite a bit, quite a big margin. If you look at the smaller companies who will earn less than 50 crore, they'll be more competitive. And tax rates coming down from 30% to 25% is quite significant in terms of percentage decline. And this actually creates a situation where many individuals who own these companies used to take salaries. Now there will be an incentive for them to let that money remain in their company.
Well, Dhirendra, also very quick question to you. Very quick question. What is your advice right now for investors who are looking at this budget? Obviously, no change there in our investment climate at all. So just continue investing in our mutual funds and our SIPs as we were doing up till now.
Absolutely. If you are, you should be guided by your plans. And, budget has once again reminded you that don't try and plan, don't try and be erratic about it. It has also been a big relief. I was very much expecting that, the capital gains thing which was referred to, though denied by the finance minister, might turn out to be true. But fortunately, it has not. And that is good news. So stay on course, be guided entirely by your own goals, and do nothing.
Do nothing, of course. We've run out of time. This is always the quickest 1 hour of my we were out of time. But what we've learned from this is basically when you're investing your money, when you're an investor, you pick a plan, you stay with that plan for the long term. An event like the budget, especially like this one, has not changed our investment climate. It hasn't given us different incentives, except perhaps to relook, at real estate and fight for lower interest rates from your local bank or the bank that you're banking with. We have to wrap up this discussion. I want to thank our audience from all of the centers who joined us tonight, and of course our panelists for being kind enough to give us their time. Thank you at home for watching.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.